City Talks with Reuben Abati.
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of your number one talk show, City Talks with Reuben Abati, on your number one lifestyle station, City 1051 FM. On this show, we talk about stories of political and human interest that affect us as citizens of Nigeria and as members of a global human community. Today, we'll be discussing the United States and the Biden presidency. And to guide us through this, we have a special guest. We're truly privileged to have as our guest. Great pleasure indeed to have with us here today Professor Emmanuel Aiyede, a professor of political institutions, governance, and government policy at the University of Ibadan. Emmanuel Remi Aiyede is a former subdean, Faculty of Social Sciences, and former coordinator, Leadership and Governance Program 2010 to 2014, Center for Sustainable Development at the University of Ibadan. He had served as visiting scholar at the Electoral Institute, Independent National Electoral Commission, Abuja 2016 to 2017. He was visiting fellow, Trans-Regional Center for Democratic Studies in New York in 2000. He began his career as a fellow of the governance unit of the Development Policy Center, an independent think tank in Ibadan, in 1998, after a brief stint in journalism. He taught at the University of Lagos before joining the University of Ibadan in 2005. He has had visiting lectureship experience in several universities within Africa and outside the continent. He has been on the editorial board of Nigeria's oldest surviving newspaper, the Nigerian Tribune, since 2008. He contributes to public discourse in the Nigerian news media. His recent publications include The Proliferation of Political Parties and Election Management in Nigeria, 2018, Civil Society Efficacy, Citizenship and Empowerment in Africa, 2017. His article, The Dynamics of Civil Society and the Democratization Process in Nigeria, in the Canadian Journal of African Studies in 2003, won a medal in the World Bank Prize for Outstanding Research in Development of the Global Development Network. His essay on fiscal federalism and the dilemma of constructing a developmental state in Nigeria in the International Political Science Review in 2009 is one of the 50 most cited articles in the Sage and the journal website for several years. Professor Aiyede is a Fulbright alumnus, and he has a PhD in political science from the University of Ibadan. If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 0700-1051-1051. And you can also leave comments on WhatsApp, 090-991-64403. And on our social media accounts at City 1051 on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook. Professor Emmanuel Aiyede, thank you very much for joining us on City Talks with Reuben Abati on City 1051 FM. Well, the United States entered a new era this week on Wednesday, January 20, with the swearing in of the 46th President of the United States in the person of Joseph R. Biden, Jr., and the 49th Vice President of the United States in the person of Kamala Harris, the first black woman, first South Asian American woman to occupy the highest office in the land, that is the position of Vice President. But before January 20, there was a lot of anxiety following the attack on the Capitol on January 6 by the ultra-conservative, ultra-right, pro-President Trump protesters, terrorists, as they are called, domestic terrorists. And there was a lot of anxiety about what will happen on January 20. But January 20 seems to have gone very smoothly. President Trump had been impeached a second time, the first president to be impeached twice in the history of the United States. But, I mean, you are a scholar in the area of governance, political institutions, and reform. How did the United States manage to turn the bend, to lower the temperature, and to still have a successful inauguration, despite the anxiety that was expressed across the United States and globally? What did it for them?
Thank you very much, Reuben, for inviting me. I I've participated in a number of debates around this issue, both on social media, and I was very confident throughout the period that America will be able to overcome Trump. And the simple reason is that throughout its administration, you see individuals going out of their self-interest to act in the interest of the public against the wishes and directive of the president. And that's very critical because it shows that at critical moments, people can in fact put their private interests and their loyalty to the president as a person and put the interests of the country above such interests. So, and that's what makes institutions strong, because often we say institutions are weak in Africa. What we are in fact saying is that in the face of threat to their personal advancement, to their personal interests, people are likely to give up public interest and public value for their own personal interests. Once you have a society where people uphold the law and are able to sacrifice personal advantages for such, for the promotion or observance of the law or the rule of such society, that's how institutions become strong. So without people who are altruistic, who are public spirited, who are committed to the common good, institutions cannot be said to be strong. And we see that very clearly in the behavior of Trump, that even when we say America is over 200 years, it's an over 200 years old democracy, an individual who didn't care a hoot about rules can create so much turbulence.
But what do we need to do to make our own institutions in Africa similarly resilient? If this had happened in Africa, well, some people say we exaggerate on that score. You probably will have had an inaugural ceremony where, you know, Lady Gaga will have been asked to please be brief and get off the stage. Or the poet, Gorman, will have been asked to please be brief. And you will have had all kinds of disruptions. The president will have put his feet down. His ethnic community will have spoken up. Look at what is happening in Uganda. The president of Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, is sitting tight. He's not listening to good reason, and he's insisting that the election is the most cheating-free in the history of Uganda, except that it is cheating-free because it serves its purpose. 35 years in office, 6th term, and who knows, he may still ask for a 7th term. What is it about us in Africa that makes it difficult for our institutions to be as resilient, and what do we need to do?
Well, I would say that there's nothing really peculiar about the situation you have just described that is particularly African. What you find, especially in the debate around democratic institutions, is that the level of economic development sometimes affects how people view life, how they relate to politics, and so on and so forth. And that's why we said that democracies that have been able to promote economic growth and economic development such that we reached a particular level, like a middle income kind of society with a large mass of what we call the middle class, you are likely to have people with interest in sustaining the democratic process. So that that's one. Then the second one is that leadership is very critical because, as Putnam says, at the beginning of new polities, leadership matters because leadership mold institution. Afterwards, institution mold leadership. What we have is that we need people to have a higher sense of responsibility. And this is very important because if you go back to Max Weber, he says the state itself is problematic. and that who elects to exercise state power must elect to interact with diabolical forces. Because the state itself is built on the principle that good can come out of evil. And you need people who have that deep sense of responsibility to occupy positions of power for them to begin to transform society in a way that institutions become very strong and resilient. And we have not been lucky enough to have those kinds of people in authority. In fact, Max Weber went on to argue that to occupy state power has two basic implications. The first is that it gives you the privilege and opportunity to contribute to society, to make a mark in history. But secondly, it says the person must be very conscious of the fact that the consequences of his or her action can lead to the death of millions of people. It comes with it a great deal of responsibility, such that if you occupy such positions, you need to focus on the consequences of your action. So when you have people who don't care about the consequences of their action, you can see them plunge their society into crisis. And that's the situation you see play out, not just only in African countries, in many countries that are still trying to settle their politics. So many states in Africa have unsettled politics because they've not been able to, they've not been lucky enough to have leaders who lay the kind of foundation that you require so that others who follow can respect the certainty of law and the certainty of such institutions. And so we have a situation where what we experience are largely leaders who do not care a hoot about the consequences of the action. And I can tell you how dangerous that is. If you look around where there has been civil wars before, you see the outcome or the build up to civil war derived from decisions that or indecisions that people have made who have been or who have occupied political offices. So individuals important, level of economic development also important, but leadership is always very critical because they contribute to the molding of institutions and the resilience of such institutions.
Well, Professor Aiyede, I mean, you see that the American elections generated a lot of interest in Africa, and particularly in Nigeria. In Nigeria, the response has been very emotional, and with Nigerians divided on one side or the other. You have those supporting the Democrats, those supporting the Republicans, even with the reality that many of these same Nigerians do not have a say in the matter and did not have a say in the elections in the U.S. That's one leg of it. But President Biden has now assumed office and he's taking a number of steps that have also generated interest among Africans. First is his reversal of President Trump's immigration policy. We're told that now Nigerians can go to the U.S. and seek permanent residency, which they were denied under Trump. Is that automatic or it is conditional? Second, African countries are also hoping that they will have better trade relations with the United States. Is that also given? And third, I've seen today a statement that was sent to President Biden on the specific issue of the World Trade Organization and the candidature of Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala of Nigeria. And these former U.S. diplomats and prominent figures are saying that it should be one of the first things that President Biden should deal with. The U.S. having tried to block Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's candidature. Do we have very strong grounds for optimism that all of these issues will work in our best interest with the Biden presidency?
Well, if you want to answer this question, you look back to when Obama was in power, when he was president of the United States. And if you look critically at what happened during that period, your first conclusion would be that we can only exercise cautious optimism because there's nothing automatic. And usually, America's national interest will reign supreme. Concerning the visa ban, yes, the visa ban does not necessarily mean that people can just take their bag and take the next flight to the United States. There are all kinds of regulations surrounding how you get your permanent residency. And all those processes are still in place. What he has removed is the executive order placed by Trump, which was very discriminatory. So that discrimination.
Hello, Professor Aiyede, are you still there? Hello?
Has been removed. Then, you know, the United States, because as you know, United States and Nigeria in several respects.
Hello, the connection is hanging. I'm not hearing you at this point.
One of them is, of course, the way we have a presidential model. All of this shows how Nigerians like the style of the Americans. Then secondly, you also know that we have this strong movement in Nigeria, the Pentecostal movement, and they are connected with the evangelical movement in the United States. So there's this interaction that goes on between the Pentecostal movement in Nigeria and then the evangelicals in the United States. So you find that if you look at the position of the United States, you also see Nigerian Pentecostals aligning behind the position of the evangelicals. And you know, the evangelicals in the United States were a strong backbone to the Trump presidency. And that's why you see Nigerians even going around demonstrating in support of President Trump. And secondly, you find that a lot of faith-based political positioning is also very common in Nigeria, that people prioritize their faith, and anything that comes from the faith in the form of prophecy, in the form of revelation by pastors and evangelicals, people then tend to use it. And because of that, there were all kinds of predictions, you know, in the build-up to the American elections. And you see a lot of Nigerian Christians believing those predictions and therefore acting to support the realization of what they believe would happen. Then in terms of trade, one of the very popular instruments for African trade is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which has been on for a very long time. And I think that's the basis of the benefit that we talk about when we look at the issue of trade. There are controversies around that in terms of whether there are guaranteed markets for African products and whether African products are really in high demand in the United States and whether they meet the standards, you know, that's expected of them. And more precisely, people are also worried that whether such kinds of programs don't favor the Americans who continuously subsidize a certain part of their economy, especially agriculture, and they think that whether that really benefits Africa. And then if you look at the statistics, the conclusion is not will not provide sufficient ground for optimism. Then the last issue you raised was that of the candidacy of Okonjo-Iweala. Well, as I said again, the American interest will ultimately decide, but we would expect that the Democrats will be more favorable to the candidacy of Iweala than the Trump presidency. But you never can tell, as I said, it's the American national interest that will decide. So if they think that Iweala is not likely to cause any significant harm and that she's likely to be pliable, especially coming from the World Bank, which is usually under the control of the United States, they might give her a chance. And if you also realize that she had to take an American citizenship, they would, for instance, question why it took her so long to do that. So we hope that she would, with the support of the Nigerian president and interaction with the American officials, she might have a better chance than she had under President Trump.
Well, one of the issues on the table in the United States is the plan to convict former President Trump, particularly in the Senate. Senator Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, is now saying that, that process should not start until the middle of February. The Democrats say they will present the articles of impeachment before the Senate by Monday, this coming Monday.
Yes.
And then we're likely to have that, will it not cause complications for President Biden's bipartisan compromise, which he promised, which he asked for in his inaugural speech on January 20? Particularly now that it looks like the Republicans are drawing back into their traditional holes and they are asking for respect for filibustering. And don't you think that that impeachment notice, impeachment process could create very serious problems from the Biden administration in these very early days, particularly as the Republicans are now even raising questions of the constitutionality of the move?
Well, I will begin by saying that there have been some negotiation around that. First, the Pelosi has declared that she would present the impeachment document at the Senate on Monday, and there's been some bipartisan agreement in exchange for quick Senate ratification of the nominees of President Biden. So they have agreed that the hearing on the impeachment proposal will not start until February 9. And it's part of the trade-off that the nominees will be quickly confirmed, and then they can have time to look at the impeachment later on. Yeah, in terms of the consequences of the impeachment, it is not just that some Republicans are beginning to question the constitutionality of the move. There are also those who are calculating that the removal of Trump completely from significant influence within the Republican Party is in their own political interest. So the Republicans are already divided in terms of the position. In fact, some people are already suggesting that Mitch McConnell may, in fact, support impeachment and conviction because they think that will prevent Trump from being able to stand for election in 2024. So these are some of the permutations that are going on. Of course, Biden has been in the Senate for a long time, and he understands the politics of the Senate. So he is able to walk through that process and sustain some kind of bipartisanship. And the capacity to do that is already demonstrated in the impeachment move in the House, because you find that they were able to secure at least 10 Republicans to support the impeachment motion. So I am confident that the current president is not likely to lose his bipartisan focus by trying to go it alone, even though they enjoy dominance in the Senate currently.
Well, Professor Aiyede, let me ask you, it's good you refer to President Trump and 2024. And when he was taken off from the Joint Base Andrews on January 20, he himself made the point that he will be back in some form. In what form?
Yes.
Does he really hope to come back? Can he still plot a political comeback, considering the fact that by 2024, he will probably be already 80 years? Or, will you say that his political prospects are already mortally wounded and all he's just doing is just to cling to some form of relevance? So the question is, what next for Trump, or Trumpism, which is the movement that he seems to have generated in the last 5 years?
I think one of the things that has made Trump particularly very significant is his ability to, exercise the power of the presidency, and he used it to completely take over the Republican Party. But now that he's no longer in power, his influence will naturally drain you, as you yourself has experienced in the Nigerian situation. Once you are out of that office, the way you lose the mistake and the ability to command obedience. That's the first one. And the second one is that already Trump will be kept so busy that he won't be able to really maneuver politically. Right now, they are saying, let's give him up to February 9, that he'll be able to put his legal team together to, respond to this impeachment move in the Senate. Now, that's one. Then you also have all kinds of cases in the state of New York and other places that he also has to address. So getting himself out of those problems will be the major activity that we absorb his time. So I don't see Trump being able to bounce back as so quickly that he will be the candidate to beat in 2024 in the Republican Party. And already there are permutations even within the Senate. People are already making arguments that he should be impeached in order to clip his wings. So I don't see him coming up. He himself, to say that he will bounce back again in whatever form, shows very clearly that he's not sure of what his political future will look like. And that's why he's just hoping that one way or the other, he'll be able to bounce back. But I think the chances of Trump returning to dominate the Republican Party the way he has done as president is far-fetched.
Well, Professor Aiyede, let me ask you. I mean, we've seen a change of style and a change of tone in the last few days that President Biden has taken over. And he's also trying to open up, reach out to old allies and aggrieved allies. On Friday, yesterday, he placed a call to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, over the Keystone XL pipeline. He also spoke with Andres Lobrador, the president of Mexico. But the big elephant in the room is relationship with China. He has not spoken with China yet, although President Xi Jinping is his very good friend. They've had, very strong relationship under the Obama presidency. What are we likely to see in terms of the U.S. relationship with China beyond the personal touch under President Biden?
Well, Reuben, we must note this important point that China enjoys the status of a special relationship with the United States. And what Trump did is to discountenance that tradition. I think we see a situation where we will go back to that.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.
If you want to be part of this conversation, you can call us on 07001051 and 1051. Or you leave comments on WhatsApp 09099164403 and on our social media accounts at City1051 on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook. And our guest is still Professor Emmanuel Aiyede, Professor of Political Institutions, Governance, and Government Policy. And he's been helping us to take a look at the United States and the Biden presidency. The Biden presidency, which was sworn in, 46th presidency of the United States on January 2021, and that was on Wednesday. Well, Professor Aiyede, I already have a question for you. This is from Yemi Adeogun from the UK, who joined us by Zoom. And he says, how can we ever manage to put Nigeria's interest first? Because what the Americans did was to put America's interest first, particularly on January 6th and subsequently. When and how do we draw the line in Nigeria between godfatherism, money, and the need to protect Nigeria and put Nigeria first? Hear me? Hello? Hello? Looks like Professor Aiyede is not hearing us from the studio here. Hello? He seems to be saying something, but I'm not hearing you. Hello? Did you unmute your laptop? Did you mute it? Hello, you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Oh,
yeah,
it's okay now.
Be unmuted from your end.
Oh, okay.
I'm here now.
Okay,
Yeah,
but did you get the question from Yemi Adeogun in the UK via Zoom?
Yes, when he talked about godfatherism and to get Nigerians to put the country first.
Yes, precisely. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a fundamental movement that has not occurred in Nigeria. Under colonial rule, Nigerians were socialized into seeing the government as not their own, especially during the heydays of nationalism, sabotaging government, undermining the public good was a form of protest. What we expect after independence is that Nigerians should then be socialized into seeing the government as their own. But that gap has not been addressed. So you see the dominant culture in terms of attitude towards government is to look at government as an opportunity to chop. And this has become even worse since 1999, where even in small organizations, the consciousness of the reach of public good or public interest is very, very low. People think that they can do anything and it doesn't matter. For instance, people find it difficult to connect between the huge corruption that goes on in the public space with the poor conditions of our roads, the poor health facilities that we have, and so on and so forth. We need to get to a point where people begin to see that the government exists to serve their interests and that their contribution to government affects their fortune in terms of the basic necessities of life. Until we get to that point, we will not be able to rise beyond patronage politics in its worst form, because there's patronage everywhere, but it has to be mediated by the consciousness of commitment to our common good. And we must not look at this in terms of government alone. We find it in the way people relate in organizations that are usually very large. And sometimes it tells a lot about the mindset of even so-called educated Nigerians, because people often don't see the connection between serving the public purpose as part of serving their own interests, what we mean by enlightened self-interest. And then I think the last point that we need to also talk about is that because of the deep-seated level of poverty, it's difficult to convince ordinary Nigerians that they benefit from the country. And what makes that particularly worse is that even those who have benefited, rather than thinking about how to uplift the condition of these poor and disadvantaged Nigerians, they use them as a cannon fodder when they compete for public positions or they share the national cake. And so we have that disconnect, such that you can't really preach to ordinary people to hold government to account. Rather, they will go to those who are in government to see what kind of benefits we can get. So I'll come back again to say that a lot still has to do with the middle class, the privileged elite, in terms of their ability to go beyond primitive accumulation, begin to understand the workings of the modern state, and then be able to locate their responsibility within that process. And it's something that we need to continue to do in the socialization process, whether it's in the universities, whether it's during the orientation to people who are newly elected into office, we should not just talk about the functions and activities of those offices. We need to also emphasize the need for responsibility, because you find that in the boisterous and challenging character of politics, the idea of public value, the commitment to the common good is often lost. So you find that people can go to Abuja and say, oh, we are going there to defend to protect the interests of our constituency. But deep down, they don't really see their constituency as sovereignty. Rather, they see themselves as people who are in a position to manipulate the constituency to serve their individual purpose. But power is not for personal aggrandizement. We must go beyond occupying position of government just to stay afloat. As one scholar put it, we must distinguish between seamanship and navigation. The seamanship is occupy political office, be happy, remain there. But navigation is to have a sense of responsibility that you occupy that position in order to lead your society to a particular destination. And until we get to that point where leadership navigates, they have boundaries in terms of acceptable and unacceptable behavior, we are going to continue to find it difficult. But happily, I think all hope is not lost. There are pockets of people demonstrating that kind of leadership at different levels and in different places. We need to continue to promote those who are doing good and continue to shame those who are not, so that we are lucky to have somebody who have that kind of mindset at the position of the presidency, and the person has capacity to spread that kind of value, then Nigeria will make much more rapid development that we had us as citizens.
Yeah, I guess the question that remains is, how do we get that critical mass that is value-oriented, that is public-spirited, and expand that community? And more importantly, how do we build an elite consensus around the big subject of the fact that leadership matters? I think that those are two areas of omission in Nigeria. But we have some callers on the line. Let's take some of the persons who are calling in by phone. Can we check that? Hello, your name, your location?
Good morning, Dr. Abati.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Prof.
We can hear you.
I have two issues. The first one has to do, is somehow related with the first question put forward. I begin to ask, my name is Ambrose anyway, and I live in Mowe. I begin to ask most times why we talk about things that are happening, with foreign lands, and we actually have not been able to propel this country forward. We talk of how beautiful democracy is in the U.S. and all other countries, and yet when it is time for us to vote, we still end up voting these same people, these same parties, who over time have been able to show us that they don't care. It's all about them. It's all about their allowances. It's all about their luxury. And it's all about how they want to feed fat on our economy. I am very, very worried, because from what is happening, I don't think we have learned lessons. We are always talking of America, Joe Biden, Trump. We display how good Biden is, how bad Trump is, and yet we have leaders here who are even worse, and then we clap hands for them. Secondly, talking about America and the world. Doctor, you agree with me that as I speak to you, the greatest threat to America is North Korea. And immediately Biden won, they began to display all their wares, how powerful they are militarily, and how they are prepared. And I think it was Trump that told them then that you are displaying all that you have, but you don't know what America has. I remember some time ago when these missiles were being fired, nobody knew that U.S. had what they call Patriots, that we're always, looking for these missiles in the air to detonate them. So if America is talking of their prowess, they are not making noise about it. Don't you think that America could have been able to secretly find solution to all the militarized weapons that North Korea are boasting about, how they can detonate them and render them useless. Because I see North Korea as the greatest threat, not just to America, but to the entire world. So I also want us to the prof to also, talk on that. How, do we, curb North Korea? Because I don't see China as a problem because they are partners with the U.S. How do we curb North Korea? And what I'm saying, is it possible that America could have been able to devise another patriot, to dismantle and then to render whatever chemical weapons that the North Koreans are using presently? Good morning, Doctor.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure Prof heard you very well, but I'm not too sure he will agree with you that North Korea poses the biggest threat. Yes, there's been crisis in the Korean Peninsula, and then you also have the threat of Iran over the Iran nuclear treaty of 2015, and then, of course, China with regard to trade, intellectual property, and a lot of issues. But you raised a good point. Since we know what is right and we admire what is right elsewhere, why can't we do it here in Nigeria? Over to you, Professor Aiyede.
Well, I would say that, when we look at the situation with Nigeria, there's a lot of frustration and a lot of pain. And many of us tend to look at it in terms of the cup that is half empty. Because we are thinking it's going to eventually be empty. But another way to look at it is to look at it as a cup that is half full, as a work in progress. And I think the lessons that we actually need to learn from these developed countries is to show that institutions are not easy things to develop, to maintain, and to sustain. And you can see what has happened across Europe, across the United States, the COVID-19 pandemic, that made people who have gone to the moon, people who have gone to Mars, people who are talking about touring, space tourism and all the rest, can't deal with, some of these problems. We must admit our limitations, but continue to work at it rather than lose hope or think that nothing is working in Nigeria. If you sit down and you begin to look at what the situation is in this country, there's a wide gap between expectation and performance, but it doesn't mean that we have not even moved at all. So we need sometimes to count our blessings and to encourage those who are doing well to push on. Otherwise, if we become Nigerian pessimists, the tendency is that we join the bandwagon of those who are undermining the country. So we must continue to look at Nigeria as a work in progress and encourage those who are doing good to continue to do good by our support and recognition. While those who are undermining the system, we should try to see how we can join civil society and all the debate around remodeling institutions to perform better. Because if we look at the institutions of government in Nigeria today, we can identify areas where modifications can be made. If you look at the electoral system, for instance, it's a zero-sum game. And then there are basic consequences that come from the kind of electoral system that you operate. And there are practices that can help improve on how we elect our leaders that we have not even tested. So we need people to understand our system more deeply, more closely, and then push for reforms that will be meaningful in transforming our system. Because I made that point earlier that at the beginning of new politics, leadership mold institutions, but afterward, institutions mold leadership. So we are still in a process where we need leaders who can mold these institutions, to redesign institutions, to solve problems as we encounter them as we move on. And I think that's where we have not been very fantastic in terms of performance. And if we continue to regard expertise, regard science in trying to deal with some of these problems, perhaps we'll do better than we are currently doing. And I think if that is supported with the whole idea of responsibility that I've talked about before, in terms of leadership at all levels, Nigeria will move faster than the current crawling that we are doing.
Okay, Professor Aiyede, it looks like we have another caller on the line. Your name, your location, and please go straight to the point.
Yeah.
afternoon, Dr. Abati. Good afternoon, Professor Aiyede. We have to feel up calling from Ikeja, Lagos.
Thank you.
Quickly, number one, on the issue of Joe Biden and relationship with Nigeria, I want to remind you this election when we had NSAS here. The then presidential aspirant, now President Biden, made a comment about the abuse, what we knew here as Lekki massacre. He made a comment, and again, the former aspirant of the party, that is Hillary Clinton, also made another comment. And we all know that these people are after human rights and whatever. But then, you know what happened again with the fight against military, Boko Haram, when our military were not even supported in the area of equipment. Now, with the insecurity all over Nigeria, we saw Nasarawa State Governor yesterday, the whole of Katsina, Ondo State, or also everywhere in Nigeria right now is having serious security concerns. Do you not think that with this present administration, in which a lot of things have been done, Nigeria could not have a very terrible terrain in terms of working with America under Biden? That's number one. Number two, we spoke about colonial, I want to talk about pre-independence Nigeria now. Truly, we had the first 5 years well in terms of democratic governance because we had Tafawa Balewa, Awolowo, and the rest who did well before the problem in 1965. After then, 1966 came and we had the problem of the coup, and since then we have been in this problem. And I want to ask you, Professor, do you not think that our problems up to today has a link with the amalgamation of 1914 when two different strange bedfellows were brought together as a nation without their consent? And today we have been running away from the truth that this present system is not working. Some people are still adamant, they believe we have to continue even though it does not pay a lot of people. How do you think we can actually resolve this? For me, I believe, first of all, before I can be a country, a citizen of a country, I must be in support or agreement that I want to be. Otherwise, why would I be in a forceful measure where my aspirations and my expectations are not met? Yet I'm being bound by everybody, all powers, that I should not even be human being that I want to be. So I wanted to talk in respect of that and link it to the general security problem, economic aspect, and the failure of leadership that we have right now. Good afternoon.
Well, Professor Aiyede, I'm sure you heard him.
Yeah, it's a common thing that people say. But the first thing you teach political science students about the emergence of the state system in the world is that most states emerge out of wars of conquest. So you can't really point to any state that emerged out of some kind of consensus by people. So the amalgamation or not, it's not really the issue. Because if you look at even the families that we find ourselves, you can't say, it's because my father married 3 wives and that's why all of us we are having issues. There are countries that are multi-ethnic, that are peaceful, that have advanced. Even the United States that we talked about, or even the UK, these are states that were formed by processes of conquest. America itself was a colony. And if you look at the history of the United States itself, even the Constitution of the United States was a highly contested document, throughout the history of the United States. So we must recognize that fact that the modern state emerged out of conquest and out of wars. And that the multiplicity of nationalism within a state should not be seen only as a problem. It must also be seen as a value, as something that is beneficial. And that's why in those days we used to talk about states moving from a divided state into a kind of nation state. But these days we talk about state nations because most nations of the world are made up of multinationality. And the most crisis-ridden states in the world today, Somalia and Yemen, are states that have both single ethnic group and single religion. So it's difficult to begin to put those things forward as the basis of our problem. I think we have been talking about the challenges that we face, the issue of leadership, the absence of a consciousness or commitment to the public good, the sense of mission, of leadership, of responsibility to build society. I mean, these are some of the very fundamental issues that we are talking about. If you want to go to a state where you have only one ethnic group or one, it will be a wild goose chase. Because if you even look at the concept of ethnicity, of tribe, of ethnic group, these are things that change over time. Sometimes because they are stable over a long period of time, we don't see those transformations that occur. And that's why most approaches to such issues treat them as things that are socially constructed. And we need to move beyond looking at Nigeria's problem as being the result of being multi-ethnic, multilingual, and so on and so forth. To look at India, look at the United States, look at great countries of the world, they are often multi-ethnic. And then we must not hope for an Eldorado. We must look at ourselves as individuals, as leaders in our various positions, working towards, transforming our society into what we want them to be. The truth is that many of us are good at complaining, are often not ready, to take responsibility when it beckons. And I think that's where, whether in the school, whether in the church, whether in the mosque, wherever we are in the various associations, we must begin to develop, especially those who are up and coming, that consciousness of responsibility, of they being responsible for the transformation of their society, rather than only complaining about the problems that we have. And then once we find ourselves in position, we are ill-prepared, to be able to carry out the necessary changes that are required. That's the way I look at the situation, given the studies that I have done, the exposure that I have, and my experience with leadership in this country.
Well, Abiodun Adeniyi, who is Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, says he has a question. Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi, thank you for joining us via Zoom. If you may just go ahead. Professor Aiyede is listening to you. Dr. Abiodun Adeniyi on Zoom. Okay, we don't seem to have a connection with him yet, but we seem to have a caller on the line. Hello, your name, your location, and please be brief.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello, Doc. I'm just unmuted.
Okay,
yes.
Dr. Adeniyi is now on the screen. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I do apologize, Yes, Prof, thanks for your insights, sir. And I particularly like your analysis on the dialectical interconnection between the individual and the institution. And I think that one aspect of the binary is animate and the other aspect is inanimate. We can say the individual is animate and the institution largely might be inanimate, Now, in making progress, in ensuring that there's progress between these two interactions, there's an extent to which I want to believe that the inanimate variant, which is the individual, is often a function of social, economic, and even biological construction, biological and medical construction. Is there a way we can improve on these aspects, so that I can rub off very well on the inanimate variant, which is the institution, so that we can propel ourselves beyond the pedestal that we presently are, sir. And the second one, my second observation, probably a question, is that you rightly refer to it, and I think Dr. Abati also mentioned it in this introduction. There's a sense in which sometimes we want to exaggerate the fact that a Trump will probably have succeeded in an African country, and of course we saw this privileging of nationalism and patriotism in the United States, where parties, where political partisans weren't really supportive of Trump, irrespective of they being Republicans, like Mitt Romney, like Colin Powell, and some other ones like that, And again, we also want to believe that in our own part of the world, I want to ask you specifically, if we haven't seen a semblance of it, yes, Obasanjo denied it, but there was a time Obasanjo allegedly wanted to do a third term, but this didn't work.
Absolutely.
Are we not going to say it does not look like the institutions then, particularly the National Assembly, were resistant of the alleged intransigence or the alleged attempt of Obasanjo to prolong himself in power? Those are my two posers, sir. Perhaps if you could help me. Back to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I like the way you put it in terms of the interaction between the individual and the institution. You see, we have had moments in Nigeria where people have risen to defend the public terrain. I mean, let's go back to the June 12, 1993 elections and the annulment. You'll find that there was massive resistance against the military rule, which ultimately led to the stepping aside of President Babangida. And then the struggle did not just die with him. You saw the spirited move to remove Abacha, and then how everything was eventually settled. Then you also mentioned, of course, the third term agenda that was shut down, at the National Assembly. Also go back to the experience we have with the sickness and death of Yar'Adua, and where at critical moment people stepped in to take from this. So it's not something that we can take for granted that if Trump was in Nigeria, for instance, he would get away with it. I doubt if that would happen in a context like Nigeria. Then secondly, you also see that we have all of these institutions of government that have been designed to act as accountability measures. Take, for instance, we have the Accountant General, we have the Auditor General, we have the National Assembly, distinct from the executive and so on, and we have the judicial. We expected all of this arm, act as check on one another, and we try to make sure that we strengthen some of those institutions so that they will be free from the influence, and control of the executive, so that they can rise up and challenge the excesses of the executive. But you find that sometimes it doesn't play out very well. And that's the kind of thing that Trump has taken advantage of. For 4 years, he did so many things, and you are asking yourself, why is it so difficult, for the Congress to checkmate him at every point? It shows you that all of these institutions are human institutions, and we continue to work at them. And that if you look at the history of Nigeria, all hope will not be lost, because there are moments of achievement that we can look back to and say, we were able to withstand this kind of challenge and that kind of challenge. So I think what we need to do, as I said before, is that we continue to look at these institutions and see how we can get people who are much more socialized, to preserve these institutions rather than undermine them in their dealings, whether in government or out of government. And that's why sometimes when we talk about Nigeria, we think about government only, as if government fail, the country it fails. If government succeed, the country succeeds. Leadership, even in government, taken from the private sector, is taken from the educational institution. They are taken from different sectors. From the economic sector. So politics cannot be defined in terms of those in government and government positions alone. So when we are looking at leadership, we must look at it at those levels, and we must begin to ask ourselves what's going on, what kind of leadership is demonstrated in the universities, what kind of leadership is demonstrated at the high school level, what kind of leadership do we see in the private sector, in the media. So all of these are areas where the socialization of people into society are carried out at various levels. And we must begin to infuse all of these processes with much more commitment and consciousness to the public good. We must hold people to account, especially those who talk down in Nigeria as if they have never benefited from Nigeria and give the impression that Nigeria has been a pain to everybody. I mean, look at our educational institution. We complain that they are not properly funded. But if you look at the cost of undergraduate education, university education in Nigeria today, you will know that a lot of investment in terms of subsidizing what goes on in that institution is going on. And yet people graduate from the universities and behave as if government has contributed nothing to their education. And one of the ways you can see this difference, when you look at the fees that are paid in private universities and what people pay in public universities, you'll be in a better position to appreciate that we have, in fact, been benefiting from Nigeria rather than behaving as if we have not benefited anything. Therefore, we should not be committed to Nigeria. In fact, the lesson we should take from it is that if we show more commitment to Nigeria and we committed to getting things working, we're likely to have a better society, even for ourselves and for our children, than we currently are expecting.
Thank you very much, Professor Emmanuel Aiyede. We still have so many persons trying to reach us on all the platforms, but we'll have to just wrap it up at this point and thank Professor Emmanuel Aiyede for his time and for his insights. What began as a discussion of the emergence of the Biden presidency and the American democratic process ended up inevitably, I guess also understandably, about the discussion of Nigeria. Institutions, individuals, the public good, lessons we can learn, and what we need to do to make institutions and our democracy more resilient. I would like to thank you very much, Professor Aiyede, indeed. And I also like to thank all our callers and those who reach out to us on Zoom, Twitter, and Facebook. But the conversation does not end here. You can still reach out to me on my social media account at Abati1990, both on Instagram and Twitter, and at City1051 on all social media platforms. For those of you who joined in late, well, no need to worry. You can visit the YouTube page City1051 to watch the entire show, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And don't forget also to tune in next week at noon for another exciting edition of City Talks. My name is Reuben Abati. The show was produced by Adedoja Allen, Abiodun Odunton, Ayodamola Oludara, Oluwaseun Adetitun, and Olanrewaju Onikpede Jr. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to having a conversation with you again next Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
City Talks with Reuben Abati.